So I have this typeface. I'm going to go ahead and right click it, create outlines. We don't need it live anymore. So now let's go ahead and take our pen tool, curvature tool, shape builder tool if we need it, and carve out and make this our own. So let's first start off with the X. So we want to kind of smooth that out a bit. So I'm just taking the direct selection tool, and I can delete as well. So I can go to my pen tool, erase some points. I can even take a curvature tool and just bring it down. And then if you double click the curvature tool, it'll make it a point. So just kind of a simple way to kind of make that a little bit more to our liking. And always take that direct selection tool. There's going to be some slight imperfections, and that's where having the grid on will really help you be able to do this, because sometimes it's hard to eyeball this and make sure that's straight. It may look straight, but when you put it on the grid, it may not be straight. So that's always really simple to toggle on the grid and check our work. So what we could do is we could switch this to stroke and make it pretty thin. So kind of see how everything is laying out on the grid. So let's go ahead and line all of our items on some kind of baseline. So this can be our baseline of the type right about here. Right there on that line just kind of helps us make sure everything is straight on the baseline and also the top line. So let's go ahead and go in and just make sure it dips down about the same amount. And there could be character that you add to your typography, so it is not perfect. And you may want everything to be perfectly aligned, or you may want everything to be off a little just to add character to it. It just depends on the style of logo that you're looking to do. So I feel really happy with the X, and I'm going to keep it as a stroke because I feel like I can really see it a lot better with the grid. So let's go ahead and change this really strange U, how it kind of bends and has this really small contrast and this really big contrast. It just looks kind of comical a little bit, so we want to have a more of a serious look. So let's see what we can do here. We can probably eliminate an anchor point here, and that automatically solves that issue. But now we need to thicken the space here. So what we could do is get the direct selection tool, just pull it down, and we're just hand sculpting this. Taking our handles, and probably need to bring that down quite a bit, huh? Now we need to zoom out and kind of make sure we're making the right decisions. We can bring this U up as well, so it kind of stays along the baseline. That might help as well. So all these little things can help make this character a little bit better. And don't forget about the curvature tool. It can really help in these situations where curves really need to be perfect. So what we could do, let's go ahead and eliminate that anchor point that's getting in the way. And let's do the curvature tool and see if that can't help us kind of round these corners out a little bit better than what we had before. Remember, you can always double click and change it from a round to a sharp when you have the curvature tool. So look how much we're bringing this down. It used to be such a small width, and now it's a lot. And maybe it does dip down below the baseline. Not everything has to fit perfectly. Sometimes that can be a normal typography choice. Okay, so we corrected the contrast there, and I think that looks a lot better than it did. And we can always make the decision to bring that up at the baseline. But with some characters, it's okay to go past the baseline or the top line. Okay, the L is very easy. That looks great. And then we have the F. This is going to need a lot of work. We have this really strange, wonky top. So let's see if we can't do the same thing we've been doing and change it. Let's start off with the curvature tool first. All right, so let's bring this in and straighten it up. And don't be afraid to erase anchor points and rebuild it. That's what this is all about. You can do what you can to make the shape, even if you start from scratch and do the shape. If it's just way too far gone or you can't find a typeface that works in this situation, you can always create your own. That's a little bit harder to do. But if you have a sketch, that's a way to make it a little easier. So just kind of shifting this, just making sure we have more even contrast with stroke all throughout this curve. Let's even thicken this up and match all of this together. So the thickness of this bottom of the stem of this F, let's continue that all the way, and let's bring it up here. And it's also nice to have smart guides on. Please put your smart guides on. It'll help you snap to certain positions when you're moving and shifting things around. So I have my spark guides on. What I thought was a little bit more of an immature typeface and made it a more mature one by kind of doing the kind of things we did. So what we're going to do next is I'd love to round the corners on this, because when I look at this and I go ahead and flip this into a fill and I zoom out, I see a lot of harsh corners, and that's fine if that's the look you want to go for. But I do want a softer look. If you look at the Instagram logo, the Snapchat logo, a couple of these logos, even TikTok, they kind of have a little softness to them. So I'm just going to round these corners very, very subtly. So I'm going to select all of them, and let's get our direct selection tool. I have a recent version of Illustrator, but most people have this rounded corner option. I'm going to just click and hold, and it's going to do all of the corners for me. And if you have problems sometimes with different characters, it'll have issues if you try to do them all at the same time. So in some cases, you have to individually select a letter. So let's ungroup this and do it one at a time. So let's go ahead and click, and we're just doing a very small amount. So you see how little I'm doing? Just kind of chopping off those harsh edges and making it just a little smoother. You can always go up and check the sizes on each one, so you're doing them all the same. So we're pretty much just doing a 0.01 up here in your corners. Okay, so just kind of rounded it just a little bit. I don't want to over exaggerate the roundness, because then it starts to look cartoony and immature again. So we have this done. We also now want to adjust the spacing between the characters and to make them a little tighter. Adjust our kerning. So if you ever heard of kerning, this is exactly what we're going to be doing. We need to tighten the spaces here. The grid is going to help us a lot with this. So let's kind of line it up. And we want to have the same spacing between characters, and sometimes that changes. Sometimes there's certain characters that are heavy on one side that may need tighter spacing. So this is really about what looks good to your eye. What looks like the best spacing to your eye. You don't have to be a computer and be like every space needs to be the same size. This is when your eyeball can really override certain design decisions. So I'm just going to take my arrow key, and I'm going to make sure everything is on the baseline. So I'm just making sure our characters are moved down so they rest on the baseline. Just like that. And then now I'm just going to take my arrow keys and just kind of nudge them to where I think would be some good spacing. And this is where we're going to be exploring some negative space, so maybe, we'll have to figure that one out. But I'd like to have similar spacing. They don't all have to be that way, but it's kind of a general guide. So let's say it has one column or one square. Let's go ahead and bring that over. Let's have some similar spacing between these two characters. And same goes for this. Just kind of using that. It's just very simple. And now they have some similar spacing. We zoom out. And we need to eyeball it. Is it too tight? Is it too loose? This is the time where we can adjust our kerning to make sure it's not too tight or too wide. So now for this concept, we are missing the arrow. So what we want to do is we want to bring that arrow in. And what we're going to do with this is we are going to take the direct selection tool. We're just going to eliminate these anchor points right here. And of course, we could use the shape builder tool instead. That might even be a cleaner look. Let's get our little rectangle tool. Let's just shave this part of the arm off. We're going to put the arrow in its place. Shape builder tool, hold down option, erase all of it. So that was a simple way to get rid of that. We can always go back in with the tool and do these small little changes. We can even delete that anchor point because we don't need it. So let's draw our arrow. And in this case, with an arrow being a triangle, let me see if I can't snap to grid on this one. That'll help me create a more perfect triangle. And let's also round the arrow because we've rounded the characters, so let's be consistent. So the same 0.01 rounding of the corners. And so now we need to figure out, there could be contrast here. And right now we're working just in black and white, but that doesn't mean we can't do shades of gray to emulate color in the future or contrast. So in this case, I'm going to do a light gray so we can kind of see how that overlaps the L. We're just slowly getting our concept to come alive in real vector format.